Have you ever found yourself staring at your phone, wondering why she suddenly disappeared? Maybe she ghosted you. Maybe she blocked you out of the blue. One moment, everything felt warm and hopeful. The next, it's cold silence. And there you are, confused, frustrated, and desperately looking for answers. It's a feeling no man wants to admit. But let's be honest, we've all been there. That sinking moment when someone you cared about pulls away and you're left chasing shadows. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes, the very act of making her your priority is what made you lose her in the first place. You see, many men are taught that persistence wins, that showing her how much you care will melt her heart, that availability equals value. But in reality, it's the opposite. When a woman senses that she's become the center of your emotional universe, when you orbit around her needs, her moods, her silence, you unknowingly kill the very thing that drew her to you in the first place. Mystery. Mystery is magnetic. Uncertainty breeds desire. And when you hand over your emotional power, when you become too predictable, too reactive, too dependent, you lose your edge. Here's the shift that changes the game. Detachment. I'm not talking about coldness. I'm not saying you should become emotionless or play mind games. That's not strength. That's immaturity. True detachment isn't about apathy. It's about self-possession. It's the art of being rooted in yourself. It's the ability to observe without reacting. It's the calm in the middle of chaos. And it's one of the most attractive, powerful, and liberating traits a man can cultivate. Because when you stop chasing, when you stop explaining yourself, when you stop trying to fix or prove your worth, you take your power back. And here's the paradox. When you detach from the need to be chosen, you often become the one who is desired. Why? Because you flip the dynamic. You move from scarcity to abundance, from emotional dependence to inner strength, from reacting to choosing. This is not about manipulation. This is about liberation. It's about realizing that your value as a man does not hinge on whether she texts back or not, whether she blocks you or begs to come back. Your worth isn't found in how many messages you send. It's found in your silence, in your stillness, in your ability to walk away when your dignity is at stake. The Stoic philosophers understood this deeply. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And let's be honest, you can't control her behavior, but you can control your focus, your discipline, your direction. That's the core of masculine energy. Not control, but composure. Not chasing outcomes, but cultivating presence. So if you're in that space right now, heart heavy, mind racing, wondering if you should call her again, wondering what you did wrong, stop. Take a breath. Return to yourself. Because the man who masters detachment masters his life. And in this video, we're going to break it all down. Why detachment works, how it instantly shifts the power dynamic, and how you, as a man, can develop unshakable emotional control without becoming cold or bitter. We'll look at the psychology behind attraction, the energy of silence, and how self-mastery doesn't just change your love life, it changes everything. By the end of this video, you won't just understand why she pulled away. You'll understand why her pulling away might have been the greatest gift to remind you of who you truly are. So if you're ready to stop chasing and start choosing, if you're ready to go from confused to confident, from reactive to grounded, then stay with me. Because this is where everything shifts. Part 1. She craves what she can't control. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed that the more available you are, the less she's interested? The more you reach out, the colder she becomes. But the moment you pull back, something shifts. Suddenly, she's curious, intrigued, even chasing. Why does that happen? It's not random, it's not a game, it's psychology. And more than that, it's emotional energy. Women are drawn, magnetically drawn, to what they can't fully control. You see, deep down, we all crave a bit of the unknown. Predictability may bring comfort, but it rarely creates desire. And for women, especially emotionally attuned women, mystery isn't just attractive, it's addictive. Here's the paradox. The more she can predict your next move, the more you explain yourself, the more you're always there when she calls, the more she feels safe, but not drawn. It's like reading the last page of a novel before chapter 1. There's nothing left to discover. But when you pull your energy back, when you become calm, composed, quietly self-contained, you disrupt her emotional script. Most women are used to men falling into a pattern, chasing, proving, pleasing. They're used to emotional predictability. But when you break that pattern with stillness, with presence, with detachment, you trigger something primal. She starts wondering, why isn't he chasing me? Why is he okay without me? What's going on in his world that's more interesting than me? And that's when something fascinating happens. She stops obsessing over what you used to give and starts obsessing over your absence. Your silence becomes louder than your words. Your detachment becomes the very force that pulls her in. Now let's be clear. This isn't manipulation. You're not pretending to be distant just to get a reaction. That's acting. That's insecurity. Real detachment is authentic. It comes from a place of knowing your worth, whether she's in your life or not. It's the mindset of a man who doesn't fear losing her, because he never lost himself. This is where Stoic philosophy becomes more than just theory. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." A woman can feel that kind of strength. She may not be able to explain it, but she senses it in your calm, in the way you don't rush to fix her moods, in the way you don't panic when she pulls back, in the way you stay centered, unmoved by emotional storms. And guess what? That's rare. Most men crumble under emotional pressure. Most men chase validation when it slips away. But a man who remains rooted, that's unforgettable. Let me give you an example. Think about the men in movies who captivate without saying much. James Bond, Maximus in Gladiator, even quiet characters like Jason Bourne. What do they all have in common? They're mysterious. Not because they're cold, but because they're composed. They're not desperate for attention. They're focused on mission, purpose, self-control. That's what women respond to. Not noise, not neediness, but depth, presence, self-mastery. And here's where most men go wrong. They think that being emotionally available means constantly expressing how they feel, constantly reassuring, constantly being on call. But in truth, the most emotionally attractive trait isn't oversharing, it's emotional discipline. When you stop placing your value in how she responds and start anchoring your worth in how you show up, you become magnetic. She senses your center. She feels your calm. And ironically, it's that very detachment that pulls her closer. Not because you're ignoring her, but because you've become unshakable. And in a world full of men who bend, who chase, who lose themselves in the pursuit of love, a man who holds his frame stands out like fire in the dark. So if she's growing distant, if she's testing boundaries, if she's pulled away to see how you react, don't panic. Don't beg. Don't break. Detach. And not as a tactic, but as a way of life. Because a woman doesn't chase the man who gives her everything. She chases the man who gives himself to his purpose. The man who gives himself to his peace. The man who can walk away, not because he doesn't care, but because he respects himself too much to cling. And when you become that man, you don't have to chase, because now you are the storm. Calm, silent, powerful, and impossible to forget. Part 2. Neediness destroys attraction. Let's be real for a moment. If you're texting her every few hours just to check in, if you're constantly trying to keep the conversation going, if you feel uneasy when she doesn't reply right away, then this might be hard to hear, but it needs to be said. That energy of constantly seeking validation, it doesn't build attraction. It destroys it. Now I know where it comes from. You care. You don't want to lose her. You want to show effort. And maybe you think, if I just stay present, if I just keep trying, she'll see how much I care. But here's the truth. Most men never learn until it's too late. Neediness is not love, it's fear in disguise. When you constantly reach out, when you're always available at her convenience, when her attention becomes the measure of your self-worth, you stop being a man she's drawn to and start becoming a man she feels burdened by. Because neediness doesn't say, I value you. It screams, I don't value myself without you. Let that sink in. It tells her, consciously or unconsciously, that your emotional state depends on her. And no woman wants that responsibility. Not long term, not deeply. Why? Because it creates pressure, not passion. It turns what could have been a dance of desire into a one-sided pursuit. And guess what? When something's too available, it loses value. That's not just human psychology. That's basic nature. Imagine walking into a store and seeing a luxury item behind glass. It's rare, exclusive, protected. Now imagine that same item in a bargain bin, marked 50% off, sitting next to a pile of leftovers. Same item, different presentation. One attracts attention, the other gets ignored. Your energy is no different. When you give it away without intention, without standards, without balance, you become emotionally cheap. And in her mind, easy to replace. I know that's harsh. But harsh truths save years of confusion. And here's what makes it worse. This kind of emotional neediness makes you predictable. And predictability kills intrigue. She already knows you'll text first. She already knows you'll always say yes. She already knows you'll react if she pulls away. There's no mystery, no tension, no polarity. But when you step back, when you pause instead of panic, when you let silence speak louder than 1,000 check-ins, you change the entire dynamic. Because now, your attention isn't a default, it's a gift. And gifts by nature are valuable when rare, not when they're constant and expected. Here's the shift you need to make. Stop trying to prove you're good enough. Stop offering energy to be accepted. Start living as if you already are enough, and anyone who doesn't see it simply isn't for you. This isn't arrogance. It's emotional sovereignty. The Stoics had a word for this, autokaya, meaning self-sufficiency. It's not about isolation. It's about knowing that your peace, your worth, your purpose don't need constant external validation to be real. Marcus Aurelius said,
The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts, not her responses, not her attention, not her mood swings, but how you train your own mind to be steady, calm, and focused. You see, a man of value doesn't chase for affection. He invites connection, but never begs for it.
He gives his energy intentionally, with purpose, not from desperation, not from fear. So let me ask you, are you texting her because you genuinely have something meaningful to say? Or are you texting her because silence makes you anxious? Are you reaching out because you're grounded and clear in who you are? Or because you need reassurance that you still matter to her? Be honest, because that honesty will change your life. When you let go of the need to constantly stay on her radar, you free yourself. You stop becoming a servant to her emotions and return to being the master of your own. That shift alone makes you stand out. Because it's rare. Most men operate from emotional hunger. Few operate from emotional wholeness. But the ones who do, they don't chase, they attract. They don't convince, they embody. They don't fear rejection because they've already accepted themselves. That's who you're becoming. And here's the reward. When a woman senses that you're not trying to get something from her energy, she relaxes. She feels free to come to you, not out of pressure, but out of pure magnetic pull, because real desire doesn't grow in control. It grows in space. And when you stop needing her to validate you, she finally has room to desire you. So don't let fear disguise itself as love. Don't let the noise of your insecurity drown out the power of your stillness. Be intentional with your attention. Let your energy reflect your self-worth. And always remember, a man who values himself is never needy, because he knows that true connection can never be forced. Part 3. Detachment is the ultimate power. Let's talk about what real power looks like. Not loud, not controlling, not reactive, but still calm, centered, a kind of power that doesn't shout, but when you walk into a room, it's felt. A kind of presence that says, I know who I am. Whether you stay or leave, I remain whole. That's what true detachment looks like. But let's clear something up right now. Detachment is not bitterness. It's not pretending not to care. It's not becoming emotionally numb or cold just to look strong. No. That's avoidance. That's armor worn by the wounded. Real detachment, the kind that commands respect and draws people in, is the ability to care deeply, without needing anything in return to feel complete. It's the difference between, I need you to love me so I can feel enough, and I already feel enough, and that's exactly why my love is powerful. Let that sink in. You see, most people think detachment is about pulling away from life, about not feeling anything. But the opposite is true. True detachment is about being so grounded within yourself, so rooted in your values, your peace, your mission, that nothing and no one can shake you off center if it works out. Great. If it doesn't, still great. Because you haven't tied your sense of identity to the outcome. That's freedom. And freedom is everything. That's why, when a man reaches this level of inner peace, he becomes magnetic. Not because he's trying, but because his energy says, I choose you, but I don't need you. And that's rare. Most men operate from a place of seeking attention, seeking reassurance, seeking validation. But a man who operates from detachment, he validates himself. He doesn't need her to say, you're enough, because he's already done that work. He's already looked in the mirror, faced his fears, healed his wounds, and stood tall in his truth. You feel that difference in how he speaks, in how he listens, in how he lets go. Not because he gave up, but because he respects himself too much to cling. That's what Stoic philosophers spoke about centuries ago. Epictetus once said, "He who is not happy with what he has will not be happy with what he wants." In other words, until you learn to be content in your own presence, you'll always be chasing something external, hoping it'll fix the internal. But once you develop true detachment, something powerful happens. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing loss. And you stop being controlled by emotions that don't serve your peace. Let me paint a picture. Imagine two men. Both go on a date with a woman they really like. One spends the night trying to impress her, agreeing with everything she says, complimenting her too much, constantly watching for her reaction. The other man, he's fully present. He listens. He shares who he is unapologetically. But his energy says, "This is who I am. If we connect, amazing. If not, I wish you well." Which man do you think she's more drawn to? Exactly. Because one man seeks approval, the other carries his own. That's what detachment looks like in action. Not emotional withdrawal, but emotional independence. It's the confidence to walk away when respect is lost. The clarity to say no when something violates your standards. And the wisdom to stay calm when others try to pull you into chaos. Now here's the part most people miss. Detachment doesn't make you less loving. It makes your love stronger, because it's not born from fear, it's born from choice. You're not loving to get something. You're loving because it's who you are. And that kind of love, that's rare. That's unforgettable. So if you're in a place right now where you feel like you're losing yourself for someone else, if you find yourself constantly needing her attention to feel secure, it's time to come home to yourself. Time to reclaim your emotional space, to sit with your discomfort without trying to numb it, to be still enough to hear your own voice again. Because your value was never tied to her replies. Your peace was never supposed to depend on someone else's presence. You are already enough. Whole, grounded, worthy. And when you operate from that place, not from fear, not from scarcity, but from truth, you become untouchable. Not in a way that pushes people away, but in a way that draws the right ones in and keeps the wrong ones out. So, if you want to be powerful in relationships, if you want to be respected, not just desired, learn the art of detachment, not because you're afraid of feeling, but because you've trained your heart to be free. Part 4. She will try to pull you back. Here's something no one tells you about walking away with dignity. She might come back. Not always with a grand gesture, not with apologies or explanations. Sometimes, it's subtle. A random, "Hey, how have you been?" A message out of nowhere reminding you of an inside joke you both once shared. A fire emoji reaction to your story. Or even just her liking your old post from months ago. These aren't coincidences. These are emotional hooks. It's her way of checking. Can I still reach him? Do I still have access? Because when you detached, when you stopped chasing, stopped validating, stopped reacting, something inside her noticed. And here's the paradox. She didn't miss you at first. She missed the control. She missed the emotional grip. She missed the feeling of being wanted on command. When you remove that access, when you stop responding to every breadcrumb, you force her to confront the silence she created. And that silence, it echoes. It makes her wonder, did he move on? Does he even care anymore? Was I wrong about how much power I had over him? And now, her ego starts to feel the burn. Not necessarily her heart, but her ego. That's when the test comes. Because in that moment, she's not reaching out to rebuild a genuine connection. She's reaching out to reclaim emotional control. This is where a lot of men fall back into the trap. You've done the work. You've detached. You've found peace. You've stopped seeking validation. And then boom, that message comes in. That old smile returns. That warmth in her voice shows up like it never left. And the mind plays tricks. Maybe she changed. Maybe she realized what she lost. Maybe this time it'll be different. But slow down. This is where your discipline is tested. Not in silence, but in response. Remember what Marcus Aurelius taught us. You always own the option of having no opinion. That doesn't mean becoming heartless. It means not letting someone else's sudden attention steer your inner peace. Because if you overreact, if you immediately fall back into the old rhythm, if you rush to reply, to impress, to re-engage, then all the strength you've built begins to unravel. You confirm to her, yes, you still have me. Nothing's changed. And she retreats. Again, that's how the cycle continues. Push, pull, validate, withdraw. So here's your mission when she tries to re-enter. Stay calm. Observe, don't react, respond, and only with clarity. Ask yourself, what's the intention behind her message? Is this coming from sincerity or strategy? Does re-engaging honor your growth or sabotage it? Because your time, your energy, your emotional attention, that's currency now. And not everyone gets to spend it. She doesn't need to be punished. You're not out for revenge. You're just not in the same space you once were. That's the essence of detachment. You're no longer playing emotional chess. You're not trying to win her back or push her away. You're simply free. And when you're free, you get to choose, not out of longing, but out of alignment. So if her message brings peace, clarity, and maturity, respond from strength. If it's just to test you, to soothe her boredom, or to re-establish ego control, let it pass. Because your worth is not up for negotiation anymore. You've grown. You've built emotional muscle. You've stepped into a version of yourself that doesn't flinch at temporary flattery. And here's what's powerful. When she sees that her old patterns no longer work, that her charm doesn't bend your boundaries, that you're not chasing the crumbs anymore, she feels something new. Respect. Because finally, you've shown her something few men ever do. You're not ruled by attraction. You're ruled by standards. You don't crave attention. You crave authenticity. And you're no longer seduced by a memory. You're focused on building a future that reflects your worth. So if she tries to pull you back, don't panic. Don't fantasize. Don't fall. Observe. Reflect. Stand tall. Because the man who can stay calm in the face of temptation, the man who can say no even to something that once felt like everything, that man is no longer bound by emotion. He's led by principle. And that is the man who becomes unforgettable. Part 5. She'll wonder if she was just a phase. There's something that happens when you finally go silent. Not the kind of silence that's bitter or manipulative, but the kind of silence that comes from genuine peace, from growth, from clarity, from detachment. And it's in that silence that she begins to wonder. At first, she might brush it off. She might tell herself, he's just playing a game. He'll come around. He always does. But days go by, then weeks, and there's no message. No reaction, no reach, just stillness. And suddenly the question creeps in. Was I just a phase? It's not always love that brings this question to the surface. It's ego. It's the dissonance between how she remembers being adored and now being forgotten. Because let's face it, most people are not used to being forgotten, especially by someone who once gave them so much attention, so much access, so much emotional energy. And now, nothing. It's unsettling. It's confusing. It's a crack in the mirror of how she sees herself. Because when a man who once adored her no longer shows up, it forces her to confront a question she never thought she'd have to ask. Was I really unforgettable? Or was I just another chapter in his story? And that thought, it stings. Not because she wants to be with you again, not necessarily because she regrets her choices, but because the part of her that once believed she held power over you no longer feels that power. That's where the ego begins to unravel. We all want to feel irreplaceable in someone's life. We all want to believe we left a permanent mark. But when you go silent, when your life moves on, your spirit grows stronger, your peace becomes louder than any text or phone call. She starts to wonder, did he really let go? Was I not as special as I thought? Was I just a passing moment in a man who's now chasing something greater? And here's where you need to stay anchored, because that moment is a turning point. You'll be tempted to break the silence, to comfort her confusion, to remind her, yes, you are important to me, to reassure her, to explain. But don't. Not out of pride, not out of spite, but out of discipline. Because what she's experiencing now, this internal questioning, this emotional dissonance, that's not yours to fix. It's hers to feel. And truthfully, that reflection is exactly what you once went through. When she pulled back, you questioned everything. Was I not good enough? Did I matter? Was it all just temporary? You wrestled with your worth. You lost sleep. You searched for closure that never came. And now, the energy has shifted. But here's the key difference between you then and her now. You used that pain to grow, to heal, to evolve, to rise. Now it's her turn to sit with the silence. Not because you're trying to hurt her, but because you finally stopped hurting yourself by chasing answers that no longer matter. This is the moment when she realizes she's no longer the center of your emotional universe. You're not orbiting around her anymore. You've stepped out of her gravity and built your own. And that, my friend, is true power. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injustice." In this case, the best answer is no reaction. The best closure is your composure. The most unforgettable version of you is the one who doesn't need to be remembered. You're not trying to be a mystery. You've just become a man with a mission. You're not trying to win her back. You're simply too busy winning your own life. That's why your silence speaks louder than any speech. Because it's not just the absence of noise, it's the presence of peace. And peace is rare. Most people don't know how to sit in silence. They fill the space with distraction, validation, drama. But not you. Not anymore. You've learned that a man who knows his worth doesn't chase understanding. He lets confusion echo in the hearts that once took him for granted. So if she starts asking herself, "Was I just a phase?" Let her ask. Let the silence stretch. Let her thoughts wander, because your role is not to be her reassurance. Your role is to remain rooted in the man you've become. Not the boy who needed her to feel whole, but the man who found wholeness in her absence. And maybe one day she'll realize she didn't lose you. She lost access to the rarest thing in today's world. A man who loved deeply, walked away with dignity, and never needed to look back to feel powerful. Part 6. She will mirror your energy. Let me tell you something powerful. Something most men never realize until it's too late. She will mirror your energy, not your words. Not your promises, not your intentions, your energy. You might not even notice it at first, but as you begin to reclaim your focus, as you ground yourself in purpose, as your world expands beyond her, she feels the shift. It's not about becoming cold or distant. It's about becoming so rooted in who you are, so locked in on your path, that she no longer feels you orbiting around her. And here's where it gets interesting. When you stop chasing, she starts matching. Suddenly her replies come faster. She becomes more present, more attentive. She might start reaching out first, asking about your day, laughing at things she used to ignore. Why? Because your stability forces her to recalibrate. Most women, whether they realize it or not, respond to the emotional frequency of the man they're connected to. If you're anxious, unsure, always checking in, she leans back. But if you're steady, calm, intentional, she leans in. That's not manipulation. That's polarity. That's energetic balance. And here's what separates men who grow from men who repeat the same patterns. When she starts matching your energy, do not break the frame. Because the moment you see her responding again, the temptation returns to speed up, to lean in too far, to go back to over-texting, over-explaining, over-giving. You feel the pull. She's back. Now I can go all in again. And that's exactly when the energy flips. Again. She retreats. She slows down. She starts questioning. Did I come back too easily? Did he change, or is he still the same man who placed me above himself? And just like that, the dynamic resets. You're chasing. She's pulling away. The cycle repeats. So what do you do instead? You stay grounded. You hold your pace. You don't adjust your energy to match hers. You continue leading from your center. Because your goal isn't to keep her attention. Your goal is to keep your integrity. And when you lead with integrity, people either rise to meet you or fall away. Both outcomes are a win. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched someone walk in alignment with their purpose and noticed how everyone around them starts treating them differently? It's not because they demanded respect. It's because they embodied it. That's what happens when you stop letting your emotions dictate your behavior and start letting your principles shape your presence. Women feel that. They don't just hear your words, they sense your energy. And when that energy is self-contained, when it's no longer leaking approval-seeking or insecurity, it becomes magnetic. But here's the thing. She may not consciously know why she's now replying faster. Why she's wondering what you're up to. Why she's more drawn in when you're doing less. But at a subconscious level, she's responding to one truth. You're no longer the man who needs her attention to feel whole. You've become the man who values connection, but doesn't depend on it. Who can receive love, but doesn't collapse without it. Who leads with direction, not desperation. And that shift is felt. It changes the rhythm of the interaction. Not because you tried harder, but because you tried less and aligned more. This is where Stoic philosophy gives us a major advantage. The Stoics taught, be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. Marcus Aurelius. What does that mean in this context? It means you don't control her pace. You don't force her response. You don't need her to meet you exactly where you are. But you do hold yourself to a higher standard. You do stay steady, composed, disciplined in your energy, whether she's warm or distant, whether she responds in 1 minute or 1 day. Your inner world doesn't shift. And that consistency, that unshakable calm, that's what builds real attraction. Not just momentary attention, but deep, sustainable respect. So what do you do when she starts mirroring you? You keep leading. You don't get cocky. You don't start testing her. You don't play hot and cold games. You just continue living from your values. You respond when it feels aligned. You give energy without losing yourself. You remain open, but never over-invested. Because she's not your mission, you are. And when a woman sees a man who's truly committed to himself, to his peace, to his purpose, she realizes this man can't be controlled. He can only be respected. And in a world full of men who shift based on how they're treated, the one who remains consistent becomes unforgettable. Part 7. You become irreplaceable. There's a point you reach on this journey that most people never talk about. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it changes everything. That moment when you stop pretending, stop chasing, stop performing, and you finally stand fully in your truth. You're no longer bitter. You're no longer trying to distract yourself. You're no longer forcing positivity or acting like you don't care. You just let go, with peace, with strength, with self-respect. And in that stillness, in that calm surrender to what is, something incredible happens. You become irreplaceable. Not because you're trying to be, but because you've become the rarest thing in today's world. A man who needs no external validation to feel whole. That's what true detachment creates. Not numbness, not apathy, not fake confidence. But a quiet kind of power. A presence that doesn't beg to be noticed, yet can't be ignored. Because now, you no longer tolerate breadcrumbs. You don't settle for being someone's maybe. You don't chase people who are confused about you. Why? Because you've raised your standard. And not just in how others treat you, but in how you treat yourself. You eat better. You think clearer. You move with intention. You speak with less noise, but more weight. You're not reacting to life, you're leading it. That's when people start feeling the difference. They sense your value, not in what you say, but in what you no longer entertain. You stop arguing over things that drain you. You stop over-explaining your worth. You stop auditioning for roles that don't align with your purpose, because now you are the benchmark. The standard that others have to rise to. The calm in the middle of emotional chaos. The man whose silence speaks louder than empty words. Let me ask you, have you ever met someone who made such an impact? Not because they were flashy or dramatic, but because their energy was grounded? Because they walked into every room fully anchored in who they were? That's what you're becoming. That's the essence of high value. Not what you have, not what you say, but what you embody, and people notice, especially those who once took you for granted. They remember how your energy felt, how your presence shifted the dynamic, how your absence now echoes louder than your attention ever did. And they begin to realize something they didn't see before. You were never average. You were never replaceable. They just weren't ready. But now, you're no longer waiting for them to catch up, because your path is clear. Your time is valuable, and your energy is sacred. This is what Stoic philosophy has always taught us. If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Epictetus. In other words, when you rise, not everyone will understand you. When you walk away from toxic cycles, some people will question you. When you stop tolerating games, they might call you cold. Let them. Because your life is not a stage for their comfort. You're not here to be understood. You're here to be aligned. And alignment requires standards. It requires self-discipline. It requires the courage to walk alone when necessary, so you never have to beg for company that doesn't value you. And here's the irony. The moment you stop needing to be chosen is the moment you become unforgettable. Because you're no longer available at a discount. You're no longer pouring into people who offer you a thimble in return. You're no longer placing your worth in someone else's temporary opinion. You've reclaimed your identity. You've recentered your focus. You've stepped into your own power. And now, you can't be replaced. Not because you've become arrogant, but because your value is no longer negotiable. You're the man who no longer reacts out of fear. You respond from strength. You don't chase emotions, you channel them. You don't force connection. You attract it by being fully aligned with who you are. And that's the kind of man who leaves a mark, not on social media, not in flashy gestures, but in hearts, in memories, in energy that lingers long after you've walked away. So if you've been wondering, will she regret it? Will they come back? Will anyone ever value me like I deserve? You're asking the wrong question. The real question is this: will you continue rising, regardless of who sees it? Because once you stop waiting to be recognized and start focusing on becoming undeniable, you won't need to ask who sees your value. They will feel it, they'll remember it, and most importantly, they'll never be able to replace it. Because the man who walks in peace, in principle, in power, is a man the world never forgets. Part 8. Why women chase men who pull away. Have you ever noticed that the moment you stop trying, she starts showing up? You stop texting first. You stop checking her stories. You stop trying to fix what's broken. And suddenly she's curious. She reaches out. She lingers longer in conversation. She seems interested again. What changed? Let's break it down. This isn't magic. It's not some manipulative trick. It's simply human nature, the psychology of desire. We are wired to want what feels scarce. When something is too available, too easy, too constant, we take it for granted. Not because we're bad people, but because familiarity dulls urgency. It's the same reason we leave unread messages from people we know will always be there, and obsess over someone who's just a little out of reach. Distance creates value. Space creates curiosity. Uncertainty creates emotional tension. And emotional tension? That's where attraction lives. So when you begin to pull away, not as a strategy, but because you're finally focusing on yourself, she feels it. Not just consciously, but energetically. And here's what's fascinating. She doesn't always chase you because she wants to rebuild love. Sometimes she chases to regain emotional control. Let that sink in. It's not always about you. It's about how she feels around you. You used to orbit her world. Now you've stepped out of it. And that disruption, it stings. She starts to wonder. Wait, why isn't he reacting anymore? Did he stop caring? Is he talking to someone else? It's a shift in the emotional power dynamic. And when she senses that her grip has loosened, something primal kicks in. She wants it back. Not always out of love, but out of identity. Because if a man who once prioritized her can suddenly walk away with peace, what does that say about her value, her influence, her place in your life? This is what we call ego dissonance. She begins chasing not for connection, but for clarity. She needs to know, do I still matter? And if you're not aware of this pattern, you'll mistake that curiosity for real commitment. You'll think,
She misses me. She wants to fix things. But often, it's not about building anything. It's about testing everything. And if you lean in too quickly, if you take the bait, if you fall right back into the old dynamic, the chase ends. She has her answer, and she pulls back again. So what's the solution? Don't chase, don't punish, just observe. Stay calm, stay grounded, stay rooted in your paths. Because real detachment isn't about playing games. It's about owning your peace. And that's where Stoic philosophy becomes your secret weapon. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. You can't control her reactions. You can't control when or why she reaches out. But you can control how you respond. You can choose not to get emotionally hijacked every time she sends a "Hey strangers" message. You can choose to stay rooted in your standards. The truth is this: a woman's interest isn't always a sign to re-engage. Sometimes, it's a test to see if you've truly changed. Has your detachment matured into emotional strength? Or is it just a mask for emotional dependency? Because if it's the latter, if you were just waiting for her to notice, waiting for her to come back, she'll feel that. And once again, the cycle begins. But if you've truly detached, if your energy is no longer tied to her response, if your focus is now on becoming, not proving, then she'll experience something rare. A man who doesn't need her energy to validate his own. And in today's world, that's almost mythic. That's the man who becomes a mystery. That's the man who becomes attractive again, not because he's trying, but because he's aligned. So if she's chasing now, if she's showing up again, if she's throwing emotional hooks your way, don't panic. Don't jump. Don't assume. Breathe. Observe. Ask yourself, does this re-engagement come with changed behavior or just familiar words? Is she showing up with depth or just trying to regain control? Are you stepping back in because it serves your peace or your old pattern? You've worked too hard to rebuild your frame. Don't shatter it because someone knocked on the door of your past. Remember, you are not the man you used to be. You're not operating from emotional scarcity anymore. You're not chasing to be chosen. You're choosing to live in your power. And when you do that, the world responds. People feel it. And yes, sometimes women chase it. But when they do, make sure they're chasing you, the man you are now, not the version of you they once controlled. Because the moment you start living from strength instead of fear, you stop needing to chase and start becoming the very thing they never thought they could lose. Part 9. The magnetic power of emotional distance. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like the more emotionally available you were, the more they pulled away? You opened up. You shared your thoughts, your feelings, your plans. You responded quickly, always made time, always showed up. And instead of bringing them closer, they drifted. It's frustrating, right? Because we've been told, be open, be vulnerable, be available. But the truth is, too much emotional availability too soon can kill attraction. Why? Because human nature doesn't crave constant access. We're drawn to mystery, to uncertainty, to the person we can't quite figure out. What's always present becomes invisible. What's rare becomes valuable. It's not a game, it's psychology. When someone knows exactly how you feel 24/7, when you're always available at the tap of a message, when there's no emotional distance, no space for tension, curiosity, or reflection, the magnetism dies. Why?
Because there's no edge, no pull, no wondering. What's he thinking? Why hasn't he replied yet? What's going on in his world that doesn't revolve around me? That emotional tension, that wondering, that's what makes someone lean in. It's not about being cold or distant for the sake of ego. It's about protecting your emotional energy and offering it with discernment. You see, emotional distance doesn't mean shutting down. It means sharing strategically. You don't give someone front row access to your inner world just because they showed up once. You don't offer your heart to anyone who smiles at you for 3 days straight. You reserve emotional intimacy for those who've earned it. Because here's what happens when you don't. You become emotionally predictable. And predictability creates boredom. And boredom kills desire. You stop being a mystery and start becoming a routine. Now look, this doesn't mean you should become a robot. We're not here to suppress emotion or act invincible. But if you want to be truly magnetic, you must become intentional with your emotions. You don't react to every message. You don't chase every moment. You don't dump your entire emotional world onto someone hoping they'll carry it with you. Instead, you pause, you observe, you measure. You allow space between connection and disclosure. You leave a little room for wonder, a little room for imagination. Because when a woman doesn't have full access to your emotional world, she begins to lean in, not to fix you, but to feel you. She becomes curious about what's going on behind your calm. She starts asking, what's on his mind? How does he stay so steady? Why doesn't he react like everyone else? That's the magnetic power of emotional distance. It creates an energetic contrast in a world full of oversharing and overreaching. And that contrast, it's unforgettable. Stoic philosophy calls this emotional mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The nearer a man comes to a calm mind, the closer he is to strength." Emotional distance isn't about playing games. It's about protecting your center. It's about choosing not to overspend your energy on people who haven't shown they value it. Because here's the truth. If someone can access your thoughts, your attention, your love, and your emotional vulnerability without effort, they stop appreciating it. That which is given too freely becomes taken for granted. But when you protect your presence, when you selectively share, with grace, with clarity, with intention, people feel it. They respect it, and they desire it, because it's rare. So here's a shift you can make today. Start treating your emotions like currency, not charity. You don't owe anyone immediate access to your inner world. You don't need to explain how you feel before you've even decided how you feel. You don't have to be an open book to be seen as authentic. Authenticity isn't about giving it all away. It's about being real when it matters. To the right people, at the right time. You don't have to say everything to be understood. Sometimes the most powerful presence is stillness. A thoughtful pause, a quiet, "I'm thinking." A subtle glance that speaks louder than paragraphs. Emotional distance isn't cold, it's commanding. It doesn't push people away. It invites them to lean in and listen. So if you're constantly being emotionally available and still getting overlooked, maybe it's time to stop giving everything away so easily. Maybe it's time to create a little distance, not to disconnect, but to deepen. Because in that space, in that pause, in that breath of mystery, something powerful happens. You become magnetic, not because you're playing hard to get, but because you've become hard to forget. Part 10. How being unavailable sparks her desire. Let's get one thing straight. Being unavailable doesn't mean you're ignoring her. It means you're choosing yourself first. There's a difference between being emotionally distant and being fully present in your own life. One is a performance, the other is a principle. You're not pretending to be busy. You actually are. Because your days are filled with things that matter. Your goals, your growth, your discipline, your peace. And when that becomes your reality, something fascinating happens. She starts to feel your absence, not because you're punishing her, but because you're finally prioritizing yourself. And that absence, that distance that once made you anxious to close the gap, it becomes magnetic. Because here's the truth. What is always available loses its edge. What is focused, purpose-driven, and selective becomes unforgettable. Too many men think that being a good guy means being constantly accessible. Always replying fast, always saying yes, always proving how loyal and invested they are. But here's the paradox. The more predictable you are, the less she desires you. Because when she knows she can reach you at any moment, when she knows you'll drop everything just to engage with her, there's no sense of urgency, no excitement, no polarity. Now let's be clear. I'm not saying you play games. I'm not saying you disappear just to make her chase. I'm saying you become so locked in on your purpose, so immersed in your own vision, that you're simply not sitting around waiting for a text. You've outgrown that version of yourself. You're no longer the man refreshing your inbox. You're the man building something so powerful that time becomes your most sacred resource. And she feels that. She senses your presence is no longer on standby. It has to be earned. And that subtle shift changes everything. She starts wondering, why hasn't he texted yet? What's he doing that's more important than me? Why do I miss his attention more when he's not giving it freely? This is the essence of attraction. Uncertainty, mystery, value. When you're always around, there's no mystery. When you're selectively present, your attention becomes a gift she wants to unwrap, a gift she looks forward to. A gift that actually means something, because it's no longer given by default. But here's where most men mess it up. The moment she leans in, the moment she shows renewed interest, they drop everything. They go back to constant texting. They put her back at the center of their emotional universe. They make themselves too available again. And what happens? She pulls back again. Because what sparked her desire was your unavailability, not your silence, but your substance, your depth, your direction. The Stoics knew this long before the term high-value man existed. Epictetus said, "Know first who you are, and then adorn yourself accordingly." When you know who you are, you don't chase, you attract. You don't over-explain, you embody. You don't beg for attention, you command it through presence, not pressure. So what does real unavailability look like? It's not ghosting. It's not playing hard to get. It's not pretending to be above emotion. It's this. You have a mission bigger than relationships. You protect your time like it matters, because it does. You say no to things that don't align with your values. And you don't respond instantly, not because you're cold, but because you're focused. You don't seek validation, because you're self-validating. And when she sees that you're unavailable, not because you're ignoring her, but because you're fully engaged with your life, she starts to desire you differently. Not because of what you say, but because of what you represent. You become the man whose time is earned, whose presence is meaningful, whose love is not scattered, it's intentional. That's what makes you irresistible. Because while most men offer their energy for free, you offer yours with standards. And here's what you'll start to notice. She responds quicker. She initiates more. And she starts mirroring your rhythm. She becomes more thoughtful, because now she's not just receiving your attention, she's earning it. And the best part, you didn't have to manipulate anything. You just had to stop being constantly available and start being undeniably present in your own life. So if you've been wondering why your availability hasn't created connection, if you're tired of feeling like the more you show up, the more she pulls away, it's time to flip the script. Step back, not out of fear, but out of power. Live your life like it matters. Fill your days with things that light you up. Move in purpose, not in reaction. And when you do, you won't have to ask her to notice you. She will feel it. And if she's the right one, she'll chase the fire that only a man on his path can carry. So, let's bring everything full circle. Everything we've talked about, from detachment to emotional discipline, from walking away with grace to becoming unavailable with purpose, has led us to this moment. And here's the final truth. Emotional detachment is not a tactic. It's a transformation. It's not something you fake to get someone back. It's not a short-term strategy to spark attention. It's not about silence, games, or trying to manipulate someone's emotions. It's about becoming the man you were meant to be. Because when you stop chasing, truly stop, something profound happens. You begin to lead, not just in your relationships, but in your mindset, in your energy, in your life. And here's the paradox. The more whole you become, the more she feels the shift. She can sense that your happiness doesn't depend on her response, that your peace isn't hanging on a text message, that your future is already in motion, with or without her approval. You stop being the man who waits to be chosen, and you start being the man who chooses. That changes everything. You no longer operate from emotional scarcity. You no longer tolerate confusion, disrespect, or inconsistency. Because your standard is no longer based on how you feel in the moment. It's rooted in the man you've decided to become. Let me ask you, what kind of man leads his life from emotional fullness instead of emotional need? He's grounded, focused. He doesn't react. He responds. He doesn't chase attention. He channels energy into creation. He's not driven by outcomes. He's driven by values. That's the Stoic mindset. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Epictetus. When you embody peace, you don't need to talk about how strong you've become. People feel it. They see it in your posture. They hear it in your tone. They respect it in your silence. And yes, when you embody leadership, people may come back into your life. But now, it's no longer about winning them over. It's about asking yourself, do they align with where I'm headed? Do they respect the space I built within myself? Do they deserve a seat at my table now that I've rebuilt it from the ground up? Because here's what most men don't realize. When you lead your life with vision and clarity, not everyone will be invited back into your story. And that's okay. Some people were meant to teach you, not stay with you. Some women were meant to trigger your growth, not complete your journey. And when you stop clinging to the past, you open up room for what's truly aligned with your future. That's where real freedom begins, not in getting her back, not in proving your worth, but in becoming the kind of man who no longer seeks permission to walk in his power. You've spent enough time waiting to be noticed, waiting to be understood, waiting to be chosen. Now it's time to lead. Lead your mind, lead your emotions, lead your habits, lead your presence, because that's what she was always drawn to, not your attention, not your approval, not your affection on demand, but your edge, your direction. your discipline. You want to become magnetic. Stop trying to be liked and start being real. Stop trying to impress and start being aligned. Stop showing up for her and start showing up for yourself.
The man who leads his life doesn't need to chase anything. He moves with such clarity that what's meant for him finds its way, without force, without drama. Because people don't follow words. They follow energy. And the energy of a man who has mastered detachment, it's undeniable.
So if there's one thing you take away from this entire journey, let it be this. You don't need her to choose you. You need to choose yourself over and over again. And from that place of truth, that place of self-leadership, the right people will not only notice, they'll rise to meet you. Because now, you've become more than a man who reacts. You've become a man who leads. And that is the man she never forgets. If this message spoke to you, if you're done chasing and ready to start leading, don't just keep it in your head. Make it your mindset. Tap that like button if you're reclaiming your power today. Subscribe if you're walking this path of self-mastery with me, because we're building something stronger than surface-level advice. And drop a comment below. What's one thing you're letting go of to lead your life more powerfully? Your story might be the spark someone else needs to rise.